Why would an army of ancient, powerful, and malevolent spirits, beings that have existed since the dawn of time, beg a wandering carpenter for permission to enter the bodies of a few thousand mud-dwelling animals? It is one of the most bizarre and unsettling requests in all of human history. When Jesus stepped onto the shores of the Gerasenes, he wasn't just met by a man, he was met by a legion. This wasn't a single voice, but a collective of thousands of unclean spirits who had systematically stripped a human being of his clothes, his home, his sanity, and his dignity. They had turned the image of God into a shivering, self-mutilating shadow living in the tombs. Yet, the moment the Son of the Most High God appeared, these terrifying entities transitioned from masters to beggars. The question of why the pigs isn't just about livestock. It's about a desperate tactical retreat. Why were they more afraid of the abyss, that bottomless pit of Abaddon, than they were of losing their dignity in the filth of a swine herd? To understand this request is to pull back the curtain on the rules of spiritual warfare. It reveals that demons are like vandals who would rather have a broken spray can than no weapon at all. They knew their time was short, and they knew the authority of Jesus was absolute. Imagine a man so terrifying that even the iron chains of the Roman world could not hold him. He doesn't live in a house. He haunts the tombs, screaming into the night, cutting himself with stones until his skin is a map of scars. He is the image of God being systematically dismantled by the forces of hell. But then a boat touches the shore of the Gerasenes. The man doesn't run away. He runs toward the stranger, not because he wants to, but because the unclean spirits inside him recognize their judge. They scream through his throat, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" This is not just a ghost story. It is a legal battle for a human soul. Today we go deep into the Decapolis to answer the question that has baffled readers for centuries. Why on earth did the demons ask for the pigs? In this video, we are going to explore the legal rights of the spirit realm, the cultural significance of the Gentile world of the Decapolis, and the chilling reason why the demons would rather vex swine than be idle. This story is a graphic warning of the enemy's true intent, total destruction, but more importantly, it is a testament to the fact that Jesus will cross a storm, tossed sea just to rescue one soul, that the rest of the world has already written off and chained in the dark. Before we can understand the pigs, we must understand the prisoner. The man met Jesus on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, a region known as the country of the Gerasenes. This was Gentile territory, a place where Jewish laws regarding purity were ignored. The man's condition was the classic profile of possession. He had lost his clothes, his home, and his mind. In biblical history, being driven by a demon is described much like a rider driving a horse. He was no longer a person, he was a vehicle for malice. The unclean spirits had endowed him with unnatural strength, allowing him to snap chains and shackles like dry twigs. Historians and theologians note that demons despise humanity because humans carry the image of God. Like a vandal with a spray can, their only goal is to debase and grotesque the human form. They drove him into the tombs, the realm of the dead, because they wanted him to forget he was among the living. They were not just inhabiting him, they were erasing him. This man was the ultimate victim of the thief who comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. We must look deeper into the physical and spiritual geography of this encounter. When we speak of the Gerasenes and the Decapolis, we aren't just talking about dots on a map. We are talking about a spiritual frontier. The Sea of Galilee acted as a natural border between the Jewish world of purity and the Gentile world of the unclean. By sailing to the eastern shore, Jesus was intentionally entering a territory that most religious leaders of his day would have avoided at all costs. This was a land of idols, pagan altars, and, as the text makes clear, a massive industry of swine. The scriptural account in Luke 8 and Mark 5 paints a portrait of a man who had become a living monument to human failure. For a long time, he had lived among the tombs. In the ancient world, cemeteries were not just places of mourning. They were considered the most spiritually desolate places on earth. By living there, the man was existing in a constant state of ritual uncleanness, separated from his family, his community, and his own humanity. History tells us that the Decapolis was a league of 10 cities deeply influenced by Greco-Roman culture. In this setting, the man's condition was not just a medical mystery, but a public scandal. He was a resident of the village once, but his erratic and wild behavior had turned his neighbors into his jailers. The chains and shackles used to bind him were likely made of heavy iron. Yet the unclean spirits provided him with a terrifying supernatural strength that allowed him to snap metal as if it were thread. This unnatural level of power is a hallmark of possession. It is the energy of a legion channeled through a single breaking human frame. The man was driven into the wilderness, a term that implies he had no more agency over his legs than a horse does over its rider. He was constantly screaming and shrieking, a sound that would have echoed through the mountains, serving as a haunting reminder to the villagers that the image of God was being systematically destroyed just outside their city gates. When Jesus stepped out on land, he wasn't just meeting a sick man. He was invading a stronghold where the enemy felt entirely secure. This was the opening salvo of a war for the Gentile world. When Jesus asks, "What is your name?" it wasn't because he was curious. In the ancient world, Jewish exorcists believed they needed a demon's name to exert power. But Jesus' authority was different. He didn't use the name to gain power. He revealed the name to show the world the scale of the battle. The answer was legion. In the Roman military, a legion consisted of up to 6,000 soldiers. This man wasn't fighting one shadow. He was a battlefield for an entire army of darkness. The demons were in a state of dread and terror. They knew that the appointed time of judgment had not yet come, but they were in the presence of the king. They begged Jesus not to send them into the abyss, the bottomless pit described in Revelation 9:11, governed by Abaddon, the destroyer. This is a crucial historical point. Demons would rather inhabit anything, even a non-kosher animal, than be sent to the place of total inactivity. To a demon, being idle is its own kind of hell. They need a body to act as a weapon against God's creation. To understand the true weight of this encounter, we must look closer at the legal authority of the name and the terrifying reality of the entity known as Legion. When Jesus asked, "What is your name?" he was not seeking information for his own benefit. He was forcing the darkness into the light, for the sake of every witness on that shore. In the spiritual hierarchy of the ancient world, the act of naming was an act of defining. By forcing the spirit to identify itself, Jesus revealed that the man was not suffering from a simple illness or a singular trauma. He was being occupied by a military-grade force of unclean spirits. In the Roman world, a legion was the backbone of the empire's power, a disciplined unit of 6,000 soldiers designed to crush any resistance. By using this specific term, the demons were boasting of their overwhelming numbers and their total occupation of the host. This man was not just one person. He had become a human barracks for thousands of demonic entities. This density of evil explains why he possessed the unnatural strength to shatter chains and shackles. It wasn't human muscle breaking the iron. It was the collective force of a spiritual army. The reaction of these spirits to Jesus' presence is a masterclass in the theology of authority. Despite their numbers, the legion fell into a state of dread and terror. They recognized Jesus as the Son of the Most High God, a title that acknowledged his supreme rank. Their plea, "Do not torment me before the appointed time," reveals a fascinating historical and biblical truth. The demonic realm is acutely aware of the appointed time of judgment. They know their lease on this earth is temporary, and that their ultimate destination is the abyss, the bottomless pit of Revelation 9:11. The fear displayed by Legion proves that even the most powerful demonic strongholds are entirely subject to the word of Christ. These spirits were begging for a stay of execution. They knew that Jesus had the legal right to cast them into the darkness of Abaddon immediately. This exchange highlights the ironic remark mentioned in your script: the very spirits who had been violently seizing and tormenting the man for years were now crying out to be spared from torment themselves. It is the ultimate demonstration that while the enemy is a vandal seeking to destroy the image of God, he is a vandal who must ultimately answer to the landlord. Why the swine? The scriptural narrative in Luke 8 tells us a large herd of pigs was feeding on the mountain. By asking to enter the pigs, the demons were attempting a tactical retreat. If they couldn't have the man, they wanted to stay in the region. Since pigs were unclean animals under Jewish law, it was a fitting destination for unclean spirits. Jesus gave them permission. This is one of the most misunderstood moments in the Bible. Jesus allowed this not to be cruel to the animals, but to provide a visible physical demonstration of what the demons intended to do to the man. The moment Legion entered the herd, the swine acted erratically, rushing down a steep bank and drowning in the lake. The demon's nature is to destroy. They couldn't even keep a pig alive for 5 minutes. Yet God had kept this man alive for years under their assault. It proved that the man's survival was only by the mercy of God, and the pig's death was a public example of the enemy's true intent. The mystery of the swine is perhaps the most controversial and visually shocking aspect of this entire account. But from a historical and spiritual perspective, it is a masterclass in divine demonstration. When the Legion begged Jesus to enter the herd of pigs, they were looking for a loophole. They knew Jesus was about to evict them from the man, so they sought a secondary residence to avoid being cast into the abyss. By granting this permission, Jesus wasn't merely disposing of the spirits, he was exposing their nature. In the 1st century, the swine were the perfect vessels for this revelation. To the Jewish audience, pigs were the ultimate symbol of being unclean and non-kosher. By allowing the unclean spirits to enter the unclean animals, Jesus created a visceral, external representation of the internal filth that had been destroying the man. It was a public example of spiritual alignment. However, the most profound lesson lies in the immediate aftermath, the destruction of the herd. The scriptural record states that the herd, about 2,000 animals, rushed down a steep bank into the Sea of Galilee and drowned. This was not an accident. It was the inevitable end result of demonic influence. Satan's goal, as stated in John 10:10, is only to steal, kill, and destroy. These spirits could not even control a herd of animals without destroying them within minutes. This provides a staggering contrast to the man's life. The demons had wanted to kill the man for years, yet God's restraining hand had kept him alive. The death of the pigs served as a physical receipt. It showed the townspeople exactly what the demons had intended to do to their neighbor. Furthermore, this act asserted Jesus' authority over the physical and spiritual economy of the Decapolis. While some critics suggest the loss of the property was unfair, the narrative argues that the restoration of one man in his right mind is worth more than any herd of pigs. It challenged the residents to decide what they valued more, their financial security or the miraculous power of the Son of the Most High God. By permitting the demon's request, Jesus allowed the evil spirits to commit suicide in a way that proved they were not just harmful, but inherently self-destructive and incapable of coexisting with life. When the herdsmen saw their livelihood sinking into the Sea of Galilee, they didn't rejoice that a neighbor was healed. They ran to the city in fear. The people of the Decapolis came out and found a sight more terrifying to them than the possessed man. They saw the man clothed and in his right mind, sitting at the feet of Jesus. This is the great irony of the story. The townspeople were comfortable with the demon, possessed man, because they knew how to chain him, but they were terrified of the power that could set him free. They valued their economy, their swine, more than the restoration of a human life. History shows that when people are more afraid of what Jesus will change in their lives than what Satan is currently stealing from them, they will push the Savior away. They begged Jesus to leave, and in a tragic display of divine respect for human will, he got back into the boat. The reaction of the community to the healing of the possessed man reveals a chilling truth about human nature and the price of a soul. When the herdsmen witnessed the catastrophic loss of their livestock, they didn't just see a financial disaster. They saw a power that disrupted their entire way of life. They ran into the city and the surrounding country of the Gerasenes, spreading the news not of a miracle, but of a disturbance. As the multitude gathered, they were met with a sight that was more unsettling to them than the naked, screaming madman they had lived with for years. They found the man sitting at Jesus' feet, clothed and in his right mind. Historically, this is one of the most tragic moments in the Gospels. The townspeople were overwhelmed with fear. They had grown comfortable with the predictable chaos of the demon. Possessed man, they knew how to use chains and shackles to manage him. But they had no category for a man who had been restored by the authority of God. Their reaction proves that people are often more afraid of the new thing God is doing than the old destructive patterns they've grown used to. They looked at the empty hillside where the swine once stood, and then at the transformed man, and they chose the pigs over the person. This encounter highlights the horrible prayer mentioned in the script. Instead of inviting Jesus into their homes to heal their own sick or teach their children, the entire multitude begged him to depart. They were more concerned with their economic stability, their non-kosher industry, than with the presence of the Son of the Most High God. This illustrates a profound spiritual principle. Jesus is a gentleman. If he is asked to leave, he often will. The people of the Decapolis suffered from a poverty of perspective. They saw the cost of the miracle, the drowned pigs, but they failed to see the value of the man. They were seized with great fear because Jesus' presence meant that the status quo could no longer remain. To follow Jesus meant acknowledging a power that could not be controlled by human shackles. By pushing him away, they chose the safety of their graves and their tombs over the life and abundance that Jesus promised in John 10:10. They saved their remaining herds, but they lost the chance to host the creator of the universe. The man who was once called Legion now had a new identity. As Jesus was leaving, the man begged to go with him. He wanted to be a disciple, to leave the tombs forever, but Jesus said no. He told him, "Return home and tell about all the great things God has done for you." This man became the first recorded missionary to the Gentiles. He went throughout the entire city proclaiming his testimony. He was a living triumphal procession of Christ's victory. He didn't need a theology degree. He simply had to show his scars and then show his right mind. He was the light among the people that Jesus couldn't be at that moment because the town had rejected him. This reminds us that according to Colossians 2:15, Jesus has disarmed these powers. Through the work of the cross, he made a public spectacle of them, turning victims into victors. The transformation of the man from a vessel of Legion into a vessel of the gospel marks the birth of the first missionary to the Gentiles. As Jesus prepared to leave the country of the Gerasenes, the man who had been delivered made a deeply emotional request. He kept begging him to stay by his side. To the formerly possessed man, Jesus was his only source of safety. He likely feared that if the Son of the Most High God sailed away, the unclean spirits might return to reclaim their vandalized home. However, Jesus did something unexpected. He refused the man's request to join the boat and instead gave him a divine commission. Jesus told him, "Return home and tell about all the great things God has done for you." This was a strategic and compassionate decision. Jesus knew that while the townspeople had rejected him, they could not reject the living evidence of the man they had once chained. This man was a local. He was someone they had seen shrieking in the tombs and breaking chains and shackles. He was the ultimate public example of Christ's authority. By staying behind, he became a bridge between the Jewish Messiah and the Gentile world of the Decapolis. The scriptural record in Luke 8 notes a beautiful detail. While Jesus told him to tell what God had done, the man went throughout the whole city proclaiming what Jesus had done. There was no contradiction because, as his experience proved, Jesus is God. This man's testimony was a weapon against the fear and unbelief of his neighbors. He didn't need to preach a sermon on the abyss or the nature of Abaddon. He simply had to stand there, clothed and in his right mind, and tell his story. His presence in the Decapolis ensured that the seed of the gospel was planted in a region that had just pushed the Savior away. He was living proof that through the work of the cross, which was soon to come, demons would be disarmed and their victims restored. He went from being a man no one could subdue or tame to a man whose words would tame the hearts of thousands. This shows us that Jesus values one life so much that he will cross a stormy sea just to save one person, knowing that one saved life can eventually change an entire region. The story of the Gerasene man proves that no one is beyond hope. Whether you feel bound by chains and shackles of addiction, fear, or New Age deception, the authority of Jesus remains the same. The demons had to ask permission to even touch a pig. How much more is your life protected if you belong to God? If this story moved you, don't let the message stop here. We are called to be like the man in his right mind, telling our world what great things Jesus has done. What chains has God broken in your life? Let us know in the comments. Your testimony might be the light someone else needs to see. Hit the like button to help us share the power of the Word, and subscribe for more deep dives into the most fascinating stories of the Bible. Until next time, remember, he who the Son sets free is free indeed.